Hey everyone, it's Wise, and today I'll be giving you a list of amazing series that I read this year. With that being said, let's get started. First, we'll be starting with the One of Us is Lying duology by Karen M. McManus. I found about this duology when I was in the mood for a contemporary mystery book, and One of Us is Lying didn't let me down. This duology was amazing. The two books have different plots. The first one was about a teenager getting killed in detention, and they had to find out who the killer is. The second book was about a deadly truth or dare game that is happening in their school, Bayview High. It was a thrilling read, and the writing style of the series is so easy to understand. Sure, there were times when the second book, One of Us is Next, was a bit slow-paced, but I loved them all the same. Also, I have a hunch that this duology might get turned into a trilogy because there was quite a cliffhanger in the second book. I don't want to say it anymore because it will give out a lot of spoilers into the series, but even I myself want to get a third book because I have a lot of questions that weren't solved in the second book. So far, there is no news that Karen McManus, the author, would ever write another book, but I heard that she published a book called The Cousins, and I think I'll read that if I'm in the mood for another contemporary mystery. Next is the Darkest Minds trilogy by Alexandra Bracken. This is actually my very first dystopian series, and I loved it. The Darkest Minds is set in a world where a disease called IAAN has killed majority of the children's population. The rest who survived were given these powers and placed into rehabilitation camps. This series is also in science fiction genre, and the writing style is just amazing. I love it. The only issue that I had with this series was its pacing, and sometimes things were just confusing. There were times when Never Fade was sort of slow, and then there's times when Ruby, the main character, is just reflecting and flashbacking to different times in her life, specifically back when the virus didn't exist yet. But despite that, once I got to understand and accept the pacing, I ended up loving it, and I wanted an epilogue years after the events in the last book, In the Afterlight. Next is the Percy Jackson and the Olympian series by Riordan. I read this around the summer, and I love it. This series was the reason why I got into Greek mythology, because Percy Jackson centers around the Greek myths. So basically, this series is about a 12-year-old boy who learns he's the son of the Greek god Poseidon. I'll have to admit that this series was quite a light book compared to my other favorites. Percy Jackson knows how to balance the light and the action, and I love it because of that. There were times when things were serious and tough for Percy and the rest, but there was also humor as well. The other things I love about this series is the ship Percabeth and the damn joke from the Titan's Curse. Percabeth is the ship name for the Percy and Annabeth pairing, and I'll admit it myself, I didn't see Annabeth and Percy ending up together when I first read the first two books because Annabeth seemed to not like Percy, but around the third book, The Titan's Curse, when Annabeth was missing, I saw how stressed and worried Percy was about her, and I don't know why, but I just started to suspect. Even a character named Nico de Angelo asked Percy if Annabeth was his girlfriend, and I laughed when Percy said he wanted to stick Nico in a meat-flavored sack and throw him into a bunch of wolves. When they finally reunited in the end of the book, I was secretly shipping them, and I was so glad that they did end up together. The damn joke was something that came out of the blue. While searching for Annabeth, Percy, Grover, Thalia, and Zoe entered the dam, and all of them were tired from the journey, so Zoe suggested that they use the damn snack bar to get something to eat, and then the damn puns kept coming. Grover and Thalia were making jokes like the damn snack bar, the damn french fries, the damn water fountain, and a lot more. Zoe, however, didn't get it, but the rest of them did. Next, I have the Divergent trilogy by Veronica Roth. This series was something that I've been dying to read because I kept hearing it all around Booktube, so when I finally got the book, I was really hyped. I immediately picked up the first book and wow, I couldn't put it down. It was fast-paced and the writing style was so simple. Divergent has that writing style that has less detail but you can still picture it in your mind. This series has these places called factions, and once you reach the age of 16, you get to pick which faction you want to stay in for the rest of your life. Before the choosing, they are given this aptitude test to guide them in picking their faction. This series starts out with our main character Tris Pryor, and she'll take the test. She ends up learning that she is a Divergent, and being a Divergent is a bad thing because Divergents are people who has traits of two or more factions, which ruins the peace of their city. The only issue that I had with this trilogy was the last book, Allegiant. It isn't that Allegiant was a bad book, but the ending of it was shocking. I won't say it because it will give out a lot of spoilers, but for anyone who's starting or currently reading the first two books, you have to prepare yourself for Allegiant. Aside from the issue I had for the ending, the pacing of the final book made it feel thicker than it already is. It has like 56 chapters, but because of the pacing it felt like 70. Luckily, it didn't make me DNF it, but Allegiant was my least favorite from the three. Next is the Maze Runner trilogy by James Dashner. I just finished this series last week, and this ended up as one of my most favorite series. This trilogy was super entertaining, the writing style is kinda like the one in Divergent, the plot is a good one, and the pacing was just right. Like Divergent, I heard about the series around Booktube, and I was super hyped to get into it. Basically, the series is about our main character Thomas, who wakes up in a grassy field called the Glade. Thomas's memory has been erased, and the whole glade is surrounded by this huge maze. The only way out of the glade is through the maze. Kids like Thomas's age lived there for about 2 years straight, trying to figure a way out, but it was useless. Thomas, filled with so much curiosity and wonder at their place, is determined to get them all out of there. I actually watched the movie first before reading the book, so I was sort of spoiled on what was going to happen, but what shocked me was how different the books were to the movies, especially in the second and third book. The films made major changes. Overall, I prefer the books. Next, I have the Hunger Games trilogy by Suzanne Collins. Like I said from my previous video, this trilogy, in my opinion, is the best dystopian series I read so far. The Hunger Games is set in a place called Panem, where people are divided into 12 districts. Each year, a reaping ceremony is held to pick the participants or the tributes for a brutal game called the Hunger Games. Our main character is Katniss Everdeen, a 16-year-old girl who volunteered to take her sister's place in the Hunger Games. Like the Maze Runner, I watched the movies first, and I realized it was a big mistake. It's not that the movies were bad or unfaithful to the books, but looking back, I wanted to experience the book version without knowing what will happen. Unlike the Maze Runner, the Hunger Games films were faithful to the books, which is the reason why I didn't read Mockingjay anymore, because I already knew what was going to happen. Finally, is The Lord of the Rings by J.R.R. Tolkien, one of the most famous sagas in the world. This series was my first high fantasy book, and it was an amazing journey with reading and watching both the books and the films. The Lord of the Rings is one of those books you can't move on after finishing it. This series is about an evil Dark Lord named Sauron who made an extremely powerful ring in the fires of Mount Doom. This ring gets stolen from him and ends up in the hands of a hobbit named Bilbo Baggins. Bilbo then passes the ring to his nephew Frodo Baggins, and Frodo is given the quest to destroy the ring before Sauron gets it back. The only issue that I had with this series was the pacing and sometimes Tolkien's writing style. I love The Lord of the Rings, but sometimes things were just slow and Tolkien's writing style is just so deep and unique compared to the other books I read. Despite that, I kept going with the series, and this, like a lot of books, became one of my most favorite series of all time. How about you? What's the best book you read this 2020? Let me know in the comments down below.